Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm just letting more people in from the waiting room. And while we're doing that, I will do some quick housekeeping. But first off, I am Debbie Schwartz, founder of Road to College and the Paying for College 101 group. And I'm here tonight with Kat Del Grosso from College Ave. And I'll introduce Kat and all her background in a little bit. But for everybody who is joining tonight, this is technically a Zoom meeting as opposed to a webinar. So if you'd like to keep your video on, it's always nice. We like to see people in the audience. You can technically unmute yourself, but if you don't have anything to say, it'd be better if you could keep your phone or your laptop muted. This is recorded. You will get a link to the recording tomorrow. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. And to get started, I would like to know who's here tonight in terms of what year your student is, either in high school or college, because quite honestly, we invited a pretty broad range of families, some families with students in 9th or 10th and 11th grade. Obviously, a lot of families here with students that are graduating high school and entering college. And then there's also families here with existing college students. So nice to see all the different range. Great. Thanks for sharing. And I think we're going to get started. There's a few more people trickling in, but the waiting room is open, so they can just come in. Okay. So actually, Kat, if you want to, can you now bring up the slides?
Sure. All right, can you see that okay?
Yes.
Great.
So tonight's topic is how to pay for college. It is sponsored by College Ave. As I mentioned, Kat works at College Ave. She is the head of Mid-Atlantic Campus and Event Development. But previous to College Ave, she actually worked at the College Board as Director of Financial Aid Solutions. And previous to that, she was at Syracuse University working in financial aid. And so just I like to share all that because as you'll hear tonight, Kat has a ton of experience in financial aid. So we are happy, actually thrilled to have her tonight, and always thankful for College Ave to be sponsoring these types of educational programs for families to learn about the process. So Kat, if you don't mind going to the next page.
Okay.
I have a quick question. I'm so sorry to interrupt. Is this Zoom meeting only for parents or is it for self as well? Because I'm a 33-year-old and I'm looking at going to college, but I've noticed that it's just parents responding, and I'm like, oh,
I mean, you can stay on, you can learn. I mean, some of this will relate to you if you've got questions. If you're not sure if it relates to you, then ask away during the process, during the session tonight.
okay, great. Thank you so much. Sorry again for interrupting. I was just curious. I was like, wait a minute, is this a grown kind of meeting for me? So yeah, thank you.
No problem. Okay. So actually, Kat, do you want to go back one slide? Just tell us a little bit more about your background, even though I shared some of it.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I've been in the field of higher education for this is actually my 30th year in the field. So I started in financial aid at the University of Rochester. And as Debbie said, I also worked at Syracuse University in financial aid as well. I've worked on the student loan side, and for I guess I'm going on yikes, about maybe 17 of my years were in student loans a long time ago, and kind of back into it in the last 5.5 years at College Ave. And I also spent a few years at College Board as well, 7 years at College Board. And so many of you are familiar with the College Board as it relates to the SAT exam, the PSAT, the qualifier for the National Merit Scholarship. And especially, you know, and also you may not be familiar yet, but I'm going to talk about it briefly tonight a little bit, is the College Board provides one of the applications for financial aid. So I worked pretty closely with that as well, the CSS profile application. So that's kind of my bio. I've been around a while, kind of circled back to the private student loan side, but I definitely know what it's like to work with the parents and students who are looking to, pursue secondary education. So post-secondary education. So
Great,
yeah,
thanks.
hopefully I've got all the answers you need tonight.
Okay, so let's talk about what the agenda is that we're going to try and cover. So I want to just acknowledge that there are families here. We have a broad range, which I mentioned earlier, and I could see it come through in the chat. We've got families here with high school juniors, which is great. I'm so glad you're here to learn this stuff. Maybe there's even some high school sophomores. The bulk of the families here are probably families with high school seniors, which makes sense. And then, and we know we have at least one adult student going back to college. And the reason why I point this out is because the topics that we're going to review tonight, for some people, this might be a review, particularly the families who have high school seniors. I mean, hopefully by this point, you know, obviously about SAI and CIA. Sorry, COA, not the
That's different.
Right.
A different federal acronym, but
Yes. We're not going to spend a ton of time on it, but I don't want you to think that this is, you know, wasteful. We really are trying to share some information for the younger families. And then we are absolutely going to get into information that families that truly are in the moment having to figure out how they're going to cover their costs for next year. We're going to address and have a lot of information for that. But I just want you to know that when we start off, some of the information might seem like for families of high school seniors, you don't need to know it. You probably already do need to know it. But for these younger families, we're so glad you're here. And so that's why we have some topics that we're trying to teach everybody a little something. So given that, we are going to talk about cost of attendance, which is COA, an important acronym to know. We'll talk about ways to lower college costs, which some of them might apply to, you know, the families with seniors graduating, but a lot of it's going to apply to families that haven't yet gone through the process, because you still have an opportunity to find ways to lower your college costs. Then we're going to get into different ways and sources of where you can get money for pay for college. And then, of course, more about student loans. So there's a lot here for lots of different groups of people.
okay. My turn, Debbie?
Go ahead. Yes.
Pursue. Okay. All right. So there is, you know, just as a background, I guess, for you to be aware of, there's a survey that Barnes & Noble College Insights puts out, and we do sponsor it, but Barnes & Noble College is basically gathering data from parents and perceptions about college costs. I have a couple of quick data slides in here just to give you a perspective. So basically, parents in that most recent survey, if you want to take a look at the red, basically, they rated their perception of what college costs for room and board and the college tuition and fees. Room and board is basically the food and the housing, college tuition and the fees, and you add all those things together, and those are really like the meat and potatoes, the most expensive things within the cost of attendance to go to college. Their perception was that it was higher. It was more than more than expected. And so I definitely want to kind of go over what the cost of attendance includes tonight, so that you don't rate this in a survey some other day where you feel like you didn't really have the information that you needed to know what's part of the cost of attendance. So we'll take a look at that. So that's just all I wanted to focus on here, is that the purpose of tonight is to make sure that you're educated on lots of the lingo, but certainly a lot of it starts with the sticker price of college, and otherwise known as the cost of attendance, so that you do have your expectations met kind of early on in the process. So the cost of attendance, or the sticker price, includes 5 groups of things that are part of, essentially these are 5 areas where the Department of Education says to colleges and universities, you have to include all of these things when you're determining how much financial aid a family can have. So in other words, if a college is determining how much financial aid to give you, they can't exclude you know, food and housing. They can't exclude books, course materials, supplies, and equipment. They have to look at all 5 of these areas when they are using kind of like a top figure to determine how much you'll be eligible for. And that way, if you think about it, is more fair and transparent, because that means, yes, it's the highest number, but the good news is that when they figure out how much financial aid you can qualify for at school A, school B, school C, they're looking at a bigger picture of, hey, well, we know that you have to get to college. That's transportation. You have to be able to get home. You have personal expenses in addition to you having to eat and sleep somewhere. And of course, you know, the tuition and fees, it's not just about what the cost of tuition is. It's like all this other stuff. And you know, in my own experience of working in financial aid for a number of years, certainly, you know, the students and families I met with throughout the year, you know, when the students actually on the campus, sometimes they feel like, wow, I didn't realize I was going to come across these types of expenses. And those, you know, it might be like additional course materials or things that they didn't know that they were going to need. And so all that to say, it's best for you to kind of understand what this COA means from the very beginning. And in fairness, your financial aid will be reflected based on the cost per each individual school. So each college obviously is going to have a different COA. But at least you can feel more comfortable knowing that they have taken into account all of the different types of things you might incur.
And so, Kat, just to summarize, if why this might be important for families who haven't necessarily gone through the process yet versus families who have that graduating senior. For the younger families, they need to understand this COA number, because when they're starting to do research on what colleges cost and understand potentially maybe what the net cost might be at a college, because they might be estimating financial aid or estimating merit scholarship. It's all going to start off of the cost of attendance. So they want to make sure that they understand that number. And then for families with seniors, why I try to emphasize why it's important, and particularly to look at your financial aid offer, is sometimes the financial aid offer doesn't always include what they would call indirect expenses, right, in the COA. And so that's when families might be kind of hit with other expenses later on and not realizing what the full year was going to cost them.
Right. And so the 2 top categories here, the tuition fees and food and housing, are billed directly by the college or university, except for if the student is living off campus or it basically is paying a landlord as opposed to paying the school directly for food and housing, it's still taken into account, even if you're an off-campus student and you're paying, you know, a third party for rent. And you're going to the grocery store to buy groceries as opposed to using a meal plan directly through the college. So, but either way, all of that stuff is taken into account, whether you're an on or off campus student. Also, if the student happens to decide to live at home with family members instead of living in an apartment or well, basically on or off campus, paying rent or paying the school for housing, they will use a lower cost of attendance for you because they'll still take into account that you still need to eat and sleep at home. So it's not like they take it out altogether. It just will be a lower figure that they take into account when they're figuring out how much financial aid you're eligible for. But that is a way to lower costs, is to live at home. It's just, please know that the cost of attendance will be adjusted accordingly, based on the fact that you would have a lower housing cost at least. The food, you'd still have high food costs, but you're, as if you were on campus or whatever, but it's the housing really that they're sort of prorating downwards in that example. And, personal expenses are things like, you got to buy toothpaste and all those sorts of everyday things. And that's kind of grouped into an average for students. Anything else, Debbie, that you want me to cover on this slide?
Nope, I think that was good.
Okay. So these are ways that you can consider lowering your cost. Whether you are currently at a college and you're currently enrolled and you're looking for ways to lower your cost of attendance, some of these will help you. And then other bullets on here would be helpful for people who are still in high school, not in college just yet. So you can make some decision. You have a more flexibility maybe on making certain decisions. So for example, you can consider going to an in-state public school if you live in, if you go to if you apply to a 2 or 4 year public school in your state, it will be cheaper than if you were to go to a public or private institution, a public school outside of your state or a private college anywhere. Because they have lower tuition for in-staters, basically. So if that's a 2 year or 4 year institution, you'll definitely be able to save money there. I will say this though, there are lots of schools that are private that may end up offering you a pretty good financial aid award, and you may be surprised when you compare what you're offered by various schools that, wow, this private school is really generous. They've given me a lot of either merit or need-based financial aid. And it's actually cheaper than what the in-state school gave me. So don't count out the private schools or the more expensive schools. You just want to make sure that you're comparing, a variety of your various offers, and you might be surprised that sometimes those are cheaper. So, if you have any concerns when you get to the point where you're applying for financial aid, and some of you on this call have already done that, if you have special circumstances, you are able to speak with the financial aid counselor or advisor or whatever the titles are of the various people who work in the financial aid office. You can contact them, usually, start with an email or a phone call. They might have online chat if you can get things started, and that would allow you to tell them what your special circumstances are. For example, if you were to lose your job or change jobs and have a lower income than your prior job that was on the applications for financial aid, then you would want to make the financial aid office know about those, and maybe they could take that into account and do a recalculation of how much you qualify for. It is important to know that colleges use what they will refer to it as basically prior year data, which all that to say is, like, when you're applying to college, let's say you're applying for the fall of 24 and the spring of 25. So this August, September coming up. The financial aid application for 24-25 is actually based on 2022 income. So it's not 23 income, it's not 24 income, it's the prior year. So if some of you folks are looking for 25, 26, that'll be based on 2023 income data from your taxes and such and so on. So with that, it's important to know that, wow, okay, 2022, I had a great job and then I lost my job, and I don't want them to use 2022 data because it's old and it doesn't apply to me now. And I am not going to be able to, I don't have the same means as I did at that time. So that's the type of thing I'm talking about here in the third bullet. That's a special circumstance that, quite frankly, is one of the most common ones that financial aid is used to hearing about. So I would say that's the number one reason why people will contact the financial aid advisors to say, I need some help. I have special circumstances. That's probably the number one reason, is the change in income. And then certainly medical bills are also another large one that we would hear about. The other most common ones I can think of are taking care of an elderly grandparent in the household. Also paying secondary tuition for like a K through 12. So if you're paying tuition for either, a younger sibling, basically, that would be another one that I saw quite a bit. And certainly nowadays with just the cost of everything being so high for food and housing and everything, I do think that the formula to calculate your eligibility for financial aid takes that into account. But there may be certain things that you've had to experience. Let me give you an example. So what if you had to withdraw from your retirement to keep your lights on, pay some bills because you've needed to do that because you were, with everything kind of going up in price, you've been experiencing hardship in that sense, and you had to take money out of your retirement. Well, that counts against you in the financial aid process if you're just looking at it on paper. But is also a common one, especially when there are economic conditions that are happening today, right now, quite frankly. So keep that in mind for when you get to that point. A lot of times I'm going to the next bullet here. A lot of times the schools will have a monthly payment plan. So let's say you can afford what they're asking you to pay for the year, but you don't want to shell out half of it in the fall and half of it in the spring. You would rather break it up over, usually it's about I'd say a 7, 8, or 9 month payment plan. And they usually will have a small fee. I don't know, I remember our last one was like $45 a month, or excuse me, $45, a one-time fee for that academic year. So it's probably it's going to be probably less than $100 for sure to participate, maybe even less than $50. But that basically allows you to break it up over the course of multiple months. So that's good for people who have, even if you're planning to take out a loan for some of what you owe the school, and then you can afford some from your savings or your 529 plans or whatever you want to do, you can use a monthly payment plan in addition to those other solutions. So I find that handy, and families always participated in those if the school had it. So I know where I worked, we always had that. So starting at a community college can certainly help save costs in the first year or two of school. So the student can, do 2 years of the general ed stuff and then move on to a 4-year school. There are also a lot of colleges that have 2+2 programs. So they like their local community colleges. So they will take, they have an arrangement with those local schools. And so the student might be able to enter into community college and already know that they will automatically, if they pass their coursework at the community college, be able to move directly into the bachelor's degree program at a 4-year school. And so you've saved money because the cost is lower for the first couple of years, and you could just slide right into the 3rd and 4th year because that school might have an arrangement with that local 2-year school. So you can always find those things out on their websites to see if they offer that type of thing, or you can always ask the admissions office on the campuses if they have, if that is offered at the schools you're looking at. That will definitely save you some money. You can do dual enrollment classes in high school. I know for the person who spoke up earlier, who's going straight into school at the age of 33, this doesn't apply to you there, but if you're in high school, you can take dual enrollment courses between, while you're in high school, you're also taking and knocking out a couple of courses at the college setting. Second to last bullet on here, there are exams called CLEP, and that basically is offered by the College Board, and it stands for College Level Examination Program, and they're credit by exam coursework. It's credit by exam coursework that you can do while you are, or prior to going into your first year of college. So you could try to knock out some college credit that way as well. And again, it's offered by the College Board. So you can just Google CLEP and College Board and you'll find it if you want to check that out. And a lot of colleges will accept those credits, but not, I guess not all, but it's something to look into to save money. And then lastly, so here's a big one, completing enough credits to graduate in under 4 years, or quite frankly, if you can at least do it in 4 years, because if you, let's say you're entering, there are some bachelor's programs obviously that are 5 years. So I'm really kind of just sort of generalizing here, but if it is a typical 4-year bachelor's program where you're taking, like if you're only taking 12 credits every semester or every quarter, or well, within the schools are either using a quarter system or a semester. But either way, if you're taking coursework that is only 12 credits every term, you probably will not, I'm going to guess you're probably not going to get out in 4 years and graduate. You kind of need to make sure that you're working with a campus academic advisor to make sure that you're on track to graduate in 4 years. If you could do it in under 4 years, that's fabulous. I mean, that would mean you were kind of, you were taking enough coursework to meet your total for the program, which could be like 120 credits basically for the program. And, over 4 years, some are going to vary, of course. It's important to work with the academic advisors at the schools so that you can either do 4 years or less, ideally, because it's going to cost you more money if you have to go a 5th year. You're going to have to pay way more with the tuition and the housing and the food and all those things I talked about with the cost of attendance earlier. So it's unfortunate. Have seen so many students over the years just really not be able to get done in 4 years. And even just going an extra semester is expensive. And so you're either taking out more loans or either way, you're paying more because you're having to take on that additional tuition and the room and board and all that stuff. So, so anyway, these are really, really important and good ways to save some money. And also, I don't have it listed, but once you get into college and if the student is living in a dorm, you could apply to become what's called a resident advisor or an RA, which will help you. Basically, it's kind of, think of it this way, it's kind of like a manager of the dorm floor. So you might have like a couple of floors in the dorm and you're the manager as the student. And so you're a peer with the people who are sleeping on that floor, but you're kind of like the go-to person and you're the what they call the resident advisor. And so sometimes schools will give you like free room and board, or at least free room and a portion of your meal plans. And it can definitely equate to thousands of dollars if you become an RA in your 2nd, 3rd, or 4th year. So that's another way to save money as well. Okay, so there are, Debbie, do you want me to keep going?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so in terms of the ways to pay for college are listed as follows. You've either saved money, or you've either saved money or you're going to use like some of your income flow to pay for college. Or you might, or I should say, or you might receive some free money from the college and universities because you might either be qualifying for academic scholarships, or you'll be able to get some extra scholarships just from, your local, some local businesses, or from when you graduate from high school, if you were able to get some scholarships kind of on your way out of high school, that's all free money. And then certainly federal programs, that's free money. And also not listed here is like state grant money as well. So there's a lot of money to be had that's just free money. You don't have to pay it back. It's awesome if you can get it, and it's just reducing. It's just, think of it like this. It's basically a coupon. It's a reduction in your cost of attendance because the amount that they want you to pay, the more free money that you have, the less that you have to come up with from the left and the right side of the slide. So again, you've got saved money or money coming from your income, free money that's coming from like either the school, the federal government, the state that you live in, or maybe some outside types of scholarships. And then on the right, we've got the last category, which is having to borrow for kind of the balance due. So it's also, you can kind of consider it as like the gap. So you have, your cost of attendance, they've taken into account. The school might give you some money. Your balance due at the bottom is X, and you might use some of your saved money towards that balance of X. But if you didn't save enough to really kind of, appropriate it for all 4 years at a time, or the whole, maybe 2 years if you're going to a 2-year program, you may end up having to borrow some money for that gap or that last piece. And so the sources of that can be either through federal student loans, federal parent loans, or private student loans that you can obtain as well. You can also borrow technically through like home equity and that sort of thing. But that would, you as a consumer, would really need to assess, okay, what's the best, what's the most expensive, what's the best choice for me and us as a family. But certainly you could also go that route as well. Okay, so here is a summary of, I'm just going to shrink my, sorry there. This is also from that Barnes & Noble College Insights survey I mentioned earlier. So this is in descending order here on this chart on the right. How are parents currently helping or planning to help pay for college? And through regular income and savings was the highest at 65%. 62% coming from grants and scholarships, again, free money. The 529s, if a family has participated in a 529 over the years, that obviously is a big one. And it's one that I often hear families say that they're gonna, they've saved something in a 529, or perhaps a grandparent has put money in for the student towards a 529. And then down from there, we've got federal student loans. The student may work. The family might take out, or the parent might take out a parent loan where it's just them borrowing on behalf of the student. Students may have a side hustle, or the families may have a side hustle or second job to help come up with extra funding towards college. We've got 16% that took out private loans, folks who took out money from a retirement account, which is obviously not the greatest because that has also means that you have a penalty from taking money out too early from a retirement account. So I wouldn't advise on that. Credit cards, not so great either, because especially today, the interest rates are nuts. And so I don't recommend, some of these sort of taking money from a retirement account or credit cards. That's really probably, I'd say the worst of the worst in terms of choices to help pay. But this is again how the survey shook out. Personal loans, home equity loans, or otherwise known as second mortgage. And then I don't know what the other would be, but that could be like, you know, borrowing money from grandma or whatnot. So on the left-hand side, how do parents, you know, currently helping or planning to help their child pay for college? 93% said yes, but they're doing their best by ways of all the things on the right. And so, so yeah, I think it's just a matter of balancing all of the options to make sure that you can pay the bill to the school. The student has all the things that can help them with the total cost of attendance that I mentioned on that sticker price slide. And ideally not going into, you know, not going into a level of debt through any loans or credit cards or anything that will, that are way outside of the norm, in other words. I will share, you know, I met with a lot of families over the years, and while there are, you know, some folks who weren't offered enough financial aid, it was kind of a burden, basically. Like it was going to cost a lot of money for them to attend where, you know, at any given moment that I was working in financial aid. It could have been either of the schools. There were always some families who were going to have to borrow quite a bit. And in the end, might not have been the greatest decision to attend that particular school. So make sure that when you're looking at a multitude of schools, that you're thinking about it long-term in terms of like, it's not a 1 year, it's not a 1 year decision. It's a multi-year decision. So you want to make sure that you're doing your best to balance all of these methods of paying for college, without coming out with an exorbitant amount of debt that you would be paying back on a monthly basis. So that's, you know, advice, just having seen a lot of decisions made over the years where it was like, wow, this is really a stretch, but we really want to go here. You know, my son or daughter really wants to go here. And, you know, some of those families were in a little bit more of a pinch than others in terms of what they needed to borrow. So you hate to see that too much. So just be careful when you're making decisions, like in the senior year of high school, or you know, for that student who's in, you know, in their 30s right here, looking to go back to school, make sure you're making a 4-year or multi-year decision, not a 1-year decision. Okay, so this is, I think this is my last data slide anyway. So coming from that survey, but how parents plan to pay with income and savings. So have families, actually, Debbie, I'm not sure if I was going to go through this one as much, but I'll do it quickly. So on the left, we have some families who have put money aside for their child's education. 75% have put something aside. Some people said no, they haven't. So of the people who put some money aside, that's who we're looking at on the right side. And, you know, we have a number of people who thought that, you know, they have 100% saved. They can cover the whole thing. But quite frankly, the majority of people can't do that. So you're not going to be alone. Many of you, I don't know how to, you know, I see there's 455 people on here. Many of you certainly do not have the means to pay 100% of college with no help. Basically, you are looking for some assistance. You haven't put enough away for 100% of the cost. The cost of education has been increasing. It's in the news all the time. It continues to go up. There was just an article a couple weeks ago about schools that have reached the $90,000 cost of attendance mark. I just, you know, when you see those types of things, regardless of how old the student is here on this call tonight, just know that there are a lot of financial aid opportunities out there, not just need-based, but also merit or academic-based and talent-based, that will help you reduce that crazy high number that you sometimes see on the news. and then, to be able to kind of afford it in a way. So don't panic by sticker price. I guess that's sort of the message here. Any questions, Debbie?
There was just one question about, and maybe if you could just give a quick explanation about Pell and SEOG grants.
Okay. Yeah, so back here I mentioned, where was it? Oh, okay, here in the middle, I mentioned I mentioned that you could, free money could include academic or talent-based things that are from the college that are scholarships. Sometimes there could be need-based grants, private scholarships from other sort of third-party organizations like your local church or places like that, Walmart, lots of places. And then the college will have free money as well, but that last bullet on there is federal money. So there are federal programs. The federal Pell Grant program is this current year, it's the maximum this year is $7,395. And it is an entitlement program essentially. So if you meet the qualifications for Pell Grants, which in this upcoming year is going to be based on like the U.S. Department of Agriculture's poverty guidelines, and it's sort of driven off of that, and it compares your income and your family size on the poverty. You can actually Google it, the USDA poverty guidelines. It sounds daunting, but it's actually like a fairly easy chart to review, and you can see kind of, okay, how does my family fall into that? The federal Pell Grant program is meant for the highest need families, and it will be based for 24-25 on the poverty guidelines. And SEOG is the Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant. And those dollar amounts will vary because that's kind of like each college and university receives only a certain amount of money in the SEOG grant program. So they are allowed to, so think of it this way. It's kind of like if you had $100 in front of you and you have, I don't know, a bunch of grandchildren, and you want to give them all money, but you don't know how to do it evenly. It doesn't all divide out. So you give them like, okay, I'm going to give my oldest ones maybe, a little bit more, or however you want to split it up. But it's basically like you have a pool of money. The college has a pool of money. They figure out how to spend it by way of need, and they give it to the highest need students, and they might give a little bit more to incoming freshmen. And then as sophomores, they might try to mirror that if they can. And juniors and seniors, it just depends on however they can figure out how they want to divvy it up. But it's not going to be the same at every school. And you may not qualify for it. It's usually given to federal Pell Grant recipients first, because those tend to be the highest need students. So the schools will, of their pot of money that they have for the SEOG program, they will tend to give it to the Pell recipients before they'll give it to other, kind of the next tier of needy families. So.
Okay.
Hope that helped.
Yeah.
Okay. So the application types in terms of applying for financial aid, these are the names of the things that you will be experiencing when you apply to school. The free application for federal student aid is the FAFSA. It is free, so don't ever pay for it. There are some entities that have tried to take advantage of people because that's just the world we live in, I guess. And they have charged for completing the FAFSA. You do not need to pay to complete the FAFSA. It will be free, and you will just need to go to college. This is studentaid.gov, this website I'm showing you here. And this is where you'll go to complete the FAFSA form. So every college and university uses that form to figure out how much financial aid they can give you. And that includes institutional money. It's also for the federal money. And then at the very end of the application, it's kind of steps you right over into the state grant aid application as well. So it's kind of handy in that sense, in that it just, at the end of the app, you just go right over to the state application. I think most of the states are using this as like the entrance in, and sometimes they don't even need you to do an extra state application. They might just have you do the FAFSA and that's enough. So it will, you can actually find on the website I just showed you, if you go under, let's see, you go under, there is a section in here where you can do, I think it's FAFSA deadlines. And you can look it up by the states. Yeah, that's where it is. So you can see like what each state in the United States has for deadlines, and those are their state application deadlines. That's what they're showing you there. And the FAFSA ties to it. So when you're done with the FAFSA, you should just look up your state on that site and then see, you know, okay, how does my state do this? What's their deadline? You know, and so the FAFSA is tied to that as well. So that's kind of like your ticket in to figure out how much financial aid you can qualify for. And then there is a small, I'm going to say semi-small population of colleges and universities who would like to have additional information beyond what I just mentioned. So they don't just use the FAFSA, they want additional information from you, and they may use either the CSS profile here, the second large bullet, or an institutional application. So just to review, everybody needs the FAFSA, pretty much. If they need extra information, it's going to come from either the CSS profile or the institutional application. But there is a very large section of the 6,000 colleges and universities who only need the FAFSA. So don't panic that you have to do two applications. So a lot of schools just need the FAFSA. So you will want to check on their school websites to see what they would like, what they need. The CSS profile .org website will actually show you, you can see here on the right that I've pointed to, where you can check the participating colleges and universities that need it. And there's a whole list there that's A to Z, and that will help you to know, okay, which colleges need that CSS profile. And then the institutional application, there isn't like a central list that shows you who needs that. You would have to find that out on the individual college websites. So the CSS profile at least kind of shows you a big list of, okay, which schools need this. And if you don't see your college on there, you'll know that they don't need it. But the institutional applications, that there is no like central location to look that up that I know of. And so you would just have to find that out on their websites. But everybody needs the FAFSA, so I'll tell you that much for sure. Okay, so what is the Student Aid Index, otherwise known as the SAI? So this past, in the past, well, let me back up. So when you fill out the FAFSA, what happens is essentially all of the income and asset data and household data is all kind of squished together, and a formula is used to take all of that into account and come up with an expected family contribution. And that the old wording of it was called the EFC, the expected family contribution. But for 24-25 coming up in this, fall coming up, the long story short, the Congress basically made some changes, and so it's been really kind of in the works for 4 years coming. And so instead of the EFC, that number that's calculated is now going to be called the SAI, or is now being called the SAI. And what that really means to you is that the SAI is a number that is used to figure out, are you eligible for Pell Grants? Are you are you in of the needier family range, or that type of thing. So they're looking at that number similar to how they looked at it for when it was called the EFC. But a lot of changes have happened with the FAFSA Simplification Act that was back in 2020. So they're just now implementing the changes that tied to that act passed by Congress 4 years ago. And the EFC has transitioned to the SAI, and that is live and cooking right now. So if you're filing the FAFSA for this fall, you'll know that the SAI number was calculated, not a quote unquote EFC, but it's in your minds. You can think of it kind of as this, a similar thing. Some of the big differences are listed here. The family size is equal to the number of exemptions on a tax return. So it's not like, let's say, for example, in 2022, you filed taxes and you had 3 exemptions on there. Maybe it was 1 parent and 2 children, or 2 parents and the child. But you had 3 people. But then you happen to have like a grandmom living with you, but you didn't, she wasn't part of your exemptions on your tax return. Well, nowadays with the new FAFSA this year for 24-25, grandma wouldn't have been part of the calculation, because the FAFSA is actually now pulling in the number of exemptions from the tax return, and that's how they're pulling in that's how they're quoting your family size. So you would have to work with the financial aid office to say, okay, well, there's 3 of us, but grandma lives with us full time, or maybe we're helping grandma with her assisted living costs, and it's, which if any of you know how that is, it's very expensive. So it's almost like having a 4th family member that you want to take into account when they're figuring out your aid eligibility, because family size does matter in terms of how much you qualify for, because you have more mouths to feed and you have more people sleeping there and having those expenses. So if there is someone else living there beyond what your exemptions are, you're going to want to let the financial aid office know that. Untaxed income. So child support received this year. So child support received, again, this is 2022 income for the 24-25 FAFSA. So if there's someone on here who's like here for a sophomore in high school, just know that this is going to be, don't use the years I'm using here but you get the concept of the FAFSA is using older income data to figure out how much you're eligible for. So for untaxed income, if you got child support, it used to be counted as income, but now it is currently for 24-25 being counted as an asset, which is good for you, because it doesn't count as much. So suffice it to say, like in the formula to calculate your SAI, it actually it diminishes how much contribution will come from you. So this is a good thing for you in terms of what it'll basically lower your it'll keep your SAI lower than what it would have been in the prior years. Third, changes to income protection allowance. So income protection allowance is something called something with that basically, if you think of it this is an easy way to explain it. So if you you have a family of, well, I'll use my family of 3 that I used a minute ago. So 3 people in the family, you've got the 1 person going to college, you've got 3 mouths to feed, and housing that will take care of 3 people in that household. You've got to buy toothpaste and all the things that are required to live, like electricity, gas, car, having transportation and all those things. So what happens in the formula is that even if, let's say your income is, $75,000, well, you still have all of these things that you have to pay as a basic human being before a school can peel any of that away to count that as a contribution towards a college. So there's an income protection allowance that protects your income. And that way it's kind of like if you made if your family made $75,000 a year, it's almost like pulling out the top layer of that just to be able to, hey, you know, you still got to be able to live. And so the formula doesn't want to like touch anything within that first range. So it's a good thing for you that the formula takes that into account. And this formula is set by the the Department of Education, by the way, or really actually by Congress. And so that helps you in the consideration for financial aid. And the changes are actually improving for this year. So so I wanted to explain what it is, but just so you know, the changes actually got better for you in the 24-25 year. And then lastly, the SAI, unfortunately, the big one that you may have heard about is that it does not take into account multiple kids in college at the same time. And this is a little bit of a head scratcher moment for some, all I would say. And it's, you know, I think
I don't think we really have words to justify it.
Yeah, it is, when they did the FAFSA Simplification Act of, in 2020, it was driven by some senator who, and long story short, like this all came from that 4 years ago. And these were the things that were going to change. It's just, we had a really long runway to do it. When I say we, I mean like the Department of Education, creating this new FAFSA for 24-25. They knew about it in 2020. They knew what was coming. It just that here we are. And unfortunately, it does not take that into account. So if you have 2 or 3 in college at the same time, it's not, what it used to do is like divide at the bottom of the formula, essentially. Like if you're doing a math problem, you know, at the very bottom of you figuring out the answer to the math problem, it was dividing by 2 in college at the end or 3 in college at the end. So you were, you know, if your family contribution came out to $10,000, it was going to, if I had 2 in college, it was going to make it $5,000. So you would qualify for more aid. Now it's, in my example there, it's going to use the $10,000. It's going to stop there, and it's not going to divide by 2 at the bottom. So you're probably wondering, what do I do about that? Because the reality is you have to pay for college for people who might be in there at the same time. And the best thing for you to do is to certainly talk with the financial aid office and see if there's anything that they can do. They are not allowed to, to make a sweeping policy that says, well, we're just going to use multiple kids in college regardless on the FAFSA, like we're gonna, because they're not physically able to do that and change the FAFSA rules. They are bound by, unfortunately, the Department of Education rules behind the scenes, which are driven by Congress. So, and again, 4 years ago, Congress, basically. So don't panic, communicate with the financial aid office. See if there's a way that or some sort of consideration that they could make. They maybe could be able to do something for you. I know that they are currently doing that for this upcoming year. They just can't like make a sweeping policy that says we're just going to do it for everybody anyway. They're just not allowed to do that. But they are decent people who work very, very hard in financial aid, and they expected you would knock on their door to say, I need you to, you know, I need a conversation to talk through this with you. So it'll be a big one for some of you. Any questions on this one?
Nope, I think we're ready. People want to know a little bit more about, maybe if you can even go through this a little quickly and talk about the loans.
Yep. Okay. So cost minus family contribution is going to be your need level. And then some schools they'll all do something different in terms of how much to give you, because they only have so much money of their own to plug in to what you'll get. So you will see a different financial aid offer from different schools, but hopefully it would be relatively similar. It just depends on the schools. Okay, so the student loan options, we have federal loans and private loans I mentioned earlier, and of the federal loans, there are two main types. One is a direct loan for the students. So direct just means you're borrowing directly from the Department of Education, and it's used to be called the Stafford Loan Program, but anyway, it's called the direct loan. It's directly from the federal government. That's why it's called that. So those have low fixed rates. I'm going to go over that in a second. Although the rates are creeping up, so we'll talk about that. And but there are some protections from the federal government that apply to federal loans, and those are things like, for example, public student loan forgiveness. Like if you work in a certain field after college, and you pay, on your loan for a certain period of time, they might forgive your loan if you're in public service. And there's also a teacher program that's similar in nature. So there are protections from the federal government that are important to know. All of the information that you would ever need is on that studentaid.gov website that I showed you here. So just know that this is here for you if you ever, after this call, would like to go. Their site is actually pretty good. It's pretty clear in terms of the tabs at the top and what you're searching for. Also, for the direct student loans, there are low annual amounts. So I'll show you that chart next. It's not a ton of money that a student, you can't just have the student borrow for college and be able to borrow enough to cover college. It just doesn't work that way anymore. I'm not sure if it's worked that way since the 70s or 80s. The cost of education has gone up, and the level of Stafford loans has stayed right level for, I don't know, pretty much 30 years while I've been in school, while I've been working on the school side here. So with one minor help to you guys a while back, but it doesn't go at the same rate as the cost of attendance going up. So I'll show you the amounts, like I said, in just a second. There's no cosigner needed. These are just student loans. So the student is borrowing their amounts directly from the Department of Ed. And the school makes it very easy for you because you're filling out what's called a master promissory note. And that is like one application that takes care of all of your years there. So it's kind of easy in that sense. You don't have to apply every year. You don't have to, it's not based on credit. It's just given to you. Most people would qualify on this phone call tonight unless you were in default of a student loan from a prior years. Parent Plus loans. So these are also federal, and just so you know that if you were to go to if the student were to go to graduate school, there are also Graduate Plus loans, but we're not focusing on that tonight just because we're really focusing on the undergraduate side. But just so you know, they do exist, and they are similar in nature to this Parent Plus loan column. There's a high origination fee on this, and the origination fee basically means this: like if you take out a $10,000 loan, the college doesn't net $10,000 towards your bill. They will net $10,000 minus 4.228% of $10,000. So you'll only net like 9,500 and some. So that piece is like gone. You're just basically paying for the convenience of having a federal borrowing through the Federal Plus Loan Program. So maybe they'll change that over the years. They've talked about it, but it's still there. And I don't expect it'll be gone for 24, 25. Technically, we don't know that yet on the origination fees, but it's been that 4.228% for a number of years. And it really just slices into the amount you expected to pay for the bill. You don't net all of that dollar amount. There are some protections that are, similar to what I mentioned earlier about, or a minute ago, about the protections from the federal government on the student loans. They do also have some protections as well on the PLUS loan side. You can borrow up to the cost of attendance minus other aid. So the COA is that sticker price I talked about earlier. It's that larger number, so that you can borrow up to that number minus any other financial aid that you have. So if the cost of attendance is $60,000, you have $20,000 of other aid. That means you could borrow 60 minus 20 equals 40,000. And so it's much more generous than what the student loan amounts are. You can go up to kind of cover a year gap. Or you can just borrow a portion of the 40,000 that you owed, or whatever amount that you owe, if you're able to balance some of it through like that slide that had all those different ways of paying, like the 529 plans or savings that you have, or some of your income. But you can take out anything up to COA minus other aid. Over on the right-hand side, private loans are through private, well, they're either through banks or private loan companies like College Ave. Basically, I don't know of any private loan lenders in my field that have an origination fee. If there is one, it's an anomaly, because most of them don't have origination fees or guarantee fees or application fees. The one issue is that there aren't the federal protections. So, like there's not going to be like a public student loan forgiveness program on the private loan side. You can borrow up to the cost of attendance minus other financial aid, which is similar to the federal PLUS loan. But if you're borrowing like 10,000 or more, I mean, to me, it's like once you get into 5 digits of applying for a loan, that's a bigger commitment. So if you're losing 4.228% on $10,000 or $20,000 per year for 4 years, that's a lot of money. You will net the 100% on most of the private loans out there. So you apply for 10,000, the school receives the 10,000 for you. Okay, so this is the chart for the undergrad. So if the student is a freshman if they're dependent, that's going to be like the middle column essentially. If it's an independent student, so for that student who was on this call who's 33 years old and looking to go back to school, that would be your columns on the right, and anyone else on this call who's in that age group. So basically over the age of 24, essentially, would fall into the independent undergraduate. Or if you're a veteran or homeless, there's a few other categories on the FAFSA that qualify you as independent. You could be a graduate student, of course. Most of the people on this phone call, I think, are going to be under the dependent undergraduate column, and the freshman amounts are $5,500 total for the freshman year, $6,500 for the sophomore year, $7,500 for the junior year and senior years. So if you take all of those, if you take that amount each year, it's a reasonable amount of debt to end up with. The lifetime aggregate maximum is $31,000 for dependent undergraduate students. And then for independent undergraduate students, you can see where your dollar amounts are a little bit higher each year, and your total aggregate or lifetime maximum is $57,500. So these are the loans on the left, direct Stafford loans. These are not the federal PLUS loans or the private loans. This is just that student loan section. So these are your dollar amounts. And today, it actually was the auction of the well, let me back up. The way that the federal government determines these interest rates is they base it on the 10-year Treasury note. So there's an auction every month that dictates what the interest rate is on, or the indices equals for the 10-year Treasury note. And today was the auction that set the rate for 24-25. So the rate was announced today. I changed the slide for you. And this is up to the minute. The direct subsidized and unsubsidized loans, the interest rate is going to be 6.533% with an origination fee of 1.057. The origination fee technically was not announced today. That usually comes a little bit later, so that could change, but I wouldn't expect that to change too much. But that origination fee is 1.057% of either 5,500, 6,500, 7,500, all these numbers you see here for each class year. If you're trying to borrow 5,500, the school won't net 5,500. You'll net 5,500 minus the 1.057% of 5,500. So it's similar to the PLUS loan, except that the origination fee is way lower for the student loan. And I think if I were you, like if you're looking to make choices on loans, you should take this loan. And I say that, I know I work for the private loan side, but I'm not gonna, we tell people, no, you really should take your federal direct student loans first, because they really are like the lower interest rates. 6.533% is kind of a high rate compared to years, you know, like the last few years, it just keeps creeping up.
The other point about the federal loans for students, it is the only loan that they can take without a cosigner.
It is.
These are truly in their name. Nobody else is responsible for them.
Yes, thank you. So yeah, the parents not applying, nobody's having to apply. This is just them. It's the student has the skin in the game in terms of like being able to, you have to pay it back, but it's, you know, it's your loan under your social security number as the student.
Wait, sorry, Kat, can you go back there for a second? There were a lot of questions which I tried to answer about people asking, well, if we have 529 money, you know, should my student, how should I use the money? Should my student take out any of these loans the first year, the second year? And to be honest, like there's no black and white answer to that because, you know, I don't know how much 529 money you have saved. I don't know what the costs are that you're trying to cover. I don't know if you have other funds, but I will just tell you my general philosophy, and kind of Kat has emphasized this, is that you have to look at how are you going to pay for all 4 years? You can't just kind of look at how am I going to cover this year's cost, because for the people who have the 529 money, maybe you don't have enough money to cover all 4 years, right? So you might want to spread out the 529 money. You might want your student to take this federal loan, even though maybe you could pay for the full year in total. But the point about the federal student loans are that once your student decides not to take it and then they become a sophomore, they can't go back and say, oh, I want to borrow the money I didn't borrow as a freshman. So, you know, if you have any doubts, it's better off that they take these federal loans. And if you end up and you can pay it off fast, and then you pay it off, and you know, you at least had the you know, the cushion of knowing that your student took advantage of it when they could. So as with all this whole process about researching colleges, deciding which one to apply to, now it's the financing, I would really sit down, spend, you know, a good hour or two, and figure out each year, you know, where your money is going to come from, what the gap is every year. There's some tax issues about, you know, taking advantage of some tax benefits as well, which are a little too much to get into right now. But it's just not a simple, you know, black and white decision about should I use all the 529 money the first year or not.
Yeah, it's a tough one. You know, you can always talk with a financial advisor if you wanted some advice on that, I guess, with your 529 advisor, if there's a person who can help guide you a little bit, that I guess that would be a suggestion. So I didn't mention this, but each of these years, like the freshman year, 5,500, the most subsidized loan money you can get. So let me explain the difference between subsidized and unsubsidized. The the easiest way to explain it is nothing is accruing if it's while the student's in school on a direct subsidized loan. So there's no interest accruing. So I guess to what Debbie was talking about, like, you might as well take the direct subsidized loan because nothing's accruing while it's there. If you have that in your financial aid award, you're not being charged extra for it. And you can always pay it off early with no prepayment penalty. So I would say definitely maybe take that if you aren't sure. To her point about, you know, once that academic year is over, you can't go back and grab onto that amount from the freshman year. So again, no interest being charged while the student's there. It is need-based. When the schools calculate your need, if you have to have need in order to qualify for it, but if you don't have need, the school is still going to give you money through the direct unsubsidized loan. So the difference there is that the interest does start accruing while you're in school, and you could pay the interest on that. Let's say, for example, you have a $2,000 unsubsidized loan during the freshman year and a $3,500 subsidized loan. You could pay the interest while the student's enrolled in school, which would probably not amount to a whole lot of money on a monthly basis. And that way, at least nothing's accruing on you while the student is there. And if you can't afford to do that, that's okay too. Otherwise, you just kind of let it ride, and the interest capitalizes, 6 months after the student graduates or ceases to be enrolled, at least half time. So when they kick into repayment, basically. So it capitalizes at repayment, essentially. So with that said, if you were trying to make choices, at least take the subsidized loan, I guess. And the unsubsidized, since the interest is accruing, you might want to make a different decision on that portion of your loan, I suppose. Okay. Any more questions on the sub and unsub in this section, Debbie?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so the Parent Plus loan. So you can get the parent loan. You can apply for the parent loan for undergraduate. You're basically applying on their behalf, on the student's behalf. So they have to be at least half time to for the parent to apply for them. It can be it can't be like a grandparent applying. It can't be some other creditworthy cosigner. It has to be the parent or the adoptive parent of the undergrad students. The undergraduate student cannot receive that loan in their own name, so they're not responsible for it. They, they're not. No one's checking their credit on that. They're not part of it. It's one person, the parent of the undergraduate student, who is applying and getting it. It can't be transferred to the student after they graduated. Sometimes it could be refinanced after graduation, but in general, just so you know, you can't. This is a question I definitely got a lot, which was, well, if I borrow this on behalf of my son or daughter, can I arrange so that they can make the payments after they graduate? And currently there is no systematic way for that to happen. That's not part of the Plus loan. It's once that parent has taken that out, it's going to be in their name unless it's able to be refinanced in some other manner after school. In order to apply for it, you do have to complete the FAFSA. So if you just wanted to take out a Plus loan and that's all you wanted, unfortunately, the Department of Education does require you to complete the FAFSA in order to apply. And then in addition to that, there is a master promissory note, and that's kind of like a loan application, but it does last multiple years, like I mentioned, for the student loan as well. They have a master promissory note that is a multi-year note, and the parents also have that available to them for the Plus loan. The rates and borrowing limits. So a Plus loan has a fixed rate, which is great. Sometimes variable rate environments are good, but not right now. The current rate got announced today as well, and that's going to be 9.083%. And the maximum, like I said earlier, is you could get up to cost of attendance minus other aid. And it's got that 4.228% origination fee. So you as a consumer will want to weigh your options and do a little shopping around, perhaps, to decide if this is the way to go, or if you want to take out a private loan or a home equity loan, because this rate is creeping up here. This what got announced today is an increase from last year. This current year's rate is
It's up a point and a half.
8.05.
Yeah.
So it's in the student rate back here this year was 5.5, and it went up to 6.533 today. So you know, it basically they hiked up 1% or more, a little bit more. So that's your rate.
And just looking honest, unfortunately, this is the highest it's been probably in 6, 7, 8, 9 years.
Yeah, I can't remember.
Yeah.
I can't remember. I mean, I'd have to look back, but maybe in, yeah, I don't even know. I'm not even sure if that rate has been that high even before the last recession. Not that I remember anyway, but so you'll make some choices there. So and then lastly, if you're looking to, I don't have a home equity slide, but you can certainly check with your bank on that to see what their rates and fees are. And also you have to decide if you really want to borrow against your home towards education, because if you did need a home equity loan for, you know, home equity repairs or home repairs, or if you had, you know, any kind of something happened, like your roof got, you know, there was a storm or something and insurance didn't fully pay it. Like you have to be careful that you're not, you know, taking out too much from that and then not have that available to you when something happens to your home and you need the money. So I'm not a financial advisor, so I can't say what's better, but that would be what I would look at if I were shopping for an educational loan, for sure. So the private loans are, on the left side, there are some that are in the name of the student. But if they're coming right out of high school, they probably will need a cosigner, at least for a couple of years. Usually it doesn't have to be a parent. It could be some other person, like a grandparent, an aunt, an uncle, a sibling, a spouse, if they're, you know, maybe a graduate level student or an older student that's not coming right out of high school. They might be able to just apply on their own. If they're, you know, usually the banks now and the lenders, like College Ave, are really looking for at least a couple year credit history. And when a student is coming directly out of high school, they don't have a credit history. So that's the reason. But, you know, maybe you wouldn't have to have a cosigner every year, but in those first couple of years right out of high school, you probably would. Can usually borrow up to the cost of attendance minus other aid. The interest rates are definitely based on the, I shouldn't say definitely, because there are some that offer just like one interest rate, but I think most of them offer a range. And the range is usually like the, you know, we call them bookends. So like the lower bookend rate would be like, let's say, you know, 4.5% to, you know, could be 15% at this point in time because of the economy. And it's going to be based on where your credit falls within and your payment history and things that are affecting your credit. So you could end up getting like the best rate that's offered or somewhere in the middle or the highest rate. And then of course you don't have to take the loan. If you don't like the rate, you can just decline it and not take it. Some lenders offer pre-qualification on their website, so you can see kind of what your interest rate range might be, and that's helpful because that's not a hard hit to your credit. It's just a soft inquiry on your credit report, and so that's a recommendation I would make for the private loans. And once you go to apply, you can, you know, it'll be technically like a hard credit pull to your credit report. Just so you know, if you're shopping around, which might be the best idea, I guess, shop around at a couple of different ones and see if you, you know, what the differences might be. You know, you can try the pre-qualification of a multitude of lenders, or if you actually applied it's not hitting your credit report every time you apply, because here's why. Basically, within a 30-day period, if you're applying for multiple education loans, the credit bureaus know that, so it's like Experian, TransUnion, or Equifax. They know that you are shopping for a particular type of loan, and they're not dinging your credit every time. So don't worry about that as much. I don't know if it affects it within a point or two, but it doesn't affect it as much as you think it would, because I actually spoke with the Experian person about that. They allow for the shopping, kind of like if you were shopping for a mortgage rate or shopping for a car loan rate, it would be the same idea. Debbie, did you have a comment? I thought I heard you.
Oh, no, sorry.
No, okay. So probably no origination fees for these. Most of them don't. And then always discuss your with the student how interest rates work and the amount that they will likely need to pay each month. Basically, usually the lenders will show you, you know, what you would expect to pay on a monthly basis. If you were to take this loan, here's how much you would end up paying on a monthly basis. So it's best to know that up front before you accept anything, because same with the PLUS loan, really. I mean, you want to know what you're getting into for the student loan on a monthly basis. You want to know what you're getting into for the federal parent loan, and you want to know what you're getting into for a private student loan. That's the way to compare apples to apples, because, you know, if you look at just rate, that's not going to give you all the information. You want to see, like, okay, I might actually get some, I can tell you for sure, like some of the private loan lenders do offer you discounts if you make payments or some payments while the student is enrolled in school. Excuse me, even paying like a small amount, like for example, $25 a month while the student's enrolled in school, it's one less pizza a month that you're, you know, going out for maybe. But it might save you thousands of dollars in the end when you're going to repay the loan. So it could make a big difference. So sometimes you'll get interest rate discounts if you have a cosigner, and you'll get interest rate discounts if you choose to pay a little bit faster than the maximum term, or a little bit pay a little bit during the college timeframe. So check that out and make sure you're seeing what's offered to you and what works best. On the right-hand side, there are private parent loans, so it's kind of similar to the PLUS loan in a way, but you can have like anybody apply on your behalf, on the student's behalf. So doesn't have to just be the parent. So it can be a grandparent or somebody like that. So that is handy. Usually you can borrow up to the cost minus other aid. And they don't typically have fees either. Some lenders do offer the parent loans, that not all of them do, but there are some, like College Ave, that do offer that. So again, on the left side, you've got private loans where the student is kind of the primary borrower, maybe with a cosigner, and on the right, you have the parent or a creditworthy person being the primary borrower, and quite frankly, the only borrower.
So Kat, before we go on, there have been a lot of questions. Can I ask some of them? Okay. One was about divorced parents. And if one of the divorced parents doesn't fill out FAFSA because maybe that, you know, they're not the one that's financially providing or providing more financial support, can the other parent still apply for a Parent Plus loan?
So the other parent didn't do the FAFSA. They would have to do a FAFSA to do it, I think. Is that true? I have to check on that. The FAFSA is required.
Right, for the Parent Plus loan. So basically, are we saying that the only parent who can take out the Parent Plus loan is in a divorce situation, is the one who fills out the FAFSA?
Just peeking here quickly on their site to see. Parent of undergraduate student who should complete eligible parents. Okay, hold on. Eligible parents. You qualify as a parent for purposes of receiving a direct plus loan on behalf of a student if you are a biological parent, legal adoptive parent, the spouse of the student's biological or legal adoptive parent. If you're not a parent as defined above, you can't take out a direct plus on behalf of a dependent undergraduate student. But in that example, and then in your question, that is a biological parent.
Yes, yes, yes.
Can we follow up?
Yes, of course. Of
Yes,
course.
let's, I don't do wrong answers. I don't like giving wrong answers.
Right, right.
I don't like guessing. Let's just put it that way. I don't think that's a good way. So we will get that answer. Debbie can send a follow-up.
Yep. A lot of questions, maybe you could just clarify about how often people have to apply to FAFSA to take out loans. Does the
Once a year.
interest- Right, and then along the same lines, does the interest rate stay the same, change every year?
The interest rate will stay the same on that one loan you took out the first year. And then the next year, it will be different based on how it's set, like it was here. So, where is it? Here it is. Excuse me. So 6.533% is this year's rate coming up. But for 25, 26, it'll be a different rate if you borrow that year, and so on. So the rate is kind of like glued, attached to the academic year that it was set by that 10-year treasury note. And once July 1, 2025 hits, it'll be a new rate for that academic year and so on.
And what about our families applying for the year for the loan for the whole year, whether it's, you know, the federal loan or a private loan, or are they applying semester by semester, and how does the money get dispersed?
Okay, I would not apply semester by semester. And here's why. First of all, if you apply for the whole year, that's only one credit check. So you won't have a second credit check pulled, like let's say you're doing it in August and then again in like December or January. That's two different credit checks if you do want to do two different loans. So I think that's bad for your credit. So taking it out, the other thing that will help you is that the interest isn't accruing on future disbursements to the school. So the money disperses per term. So you have, let's say it's a semester school. They have a fall semester and a spring semester. They will just, the loan will be dispersed in two, half in the fall and half in the spring, typically. And the interest is not accruing on the spring term disbursement until that money goes out the door to the school. So it's, in other words, there's no harm, no foul, because you're not paying anything extra by doing it for a full year. So that's the second thing that's a big deal. And the third is it's peace of mind knowing that you were approved and ready to go, and that funding is just going to come along, and the school only has to certify that the student is enrolled there once instead of twice, which means that there's no hangups in the middle there. The money is just going to show up in January because it was already set back in August to be dispersed in August and January. So it's easier on the school, it's easier on you. Peace of mind is a big deal, I think. If for some reason, because I know why, in a way, why people are asking this question, what if the interest rates like started going way down later, like in November or December for the private loans? The federal loans are going to stay at that same rate all year, so it is what it is for that. But for the private loans, or like, I guess a home equity loan, like if you wanted to apply twice, if that rate was a lot lower later, you could always cancel the second disbursement of the first loan and have the lender cancel that and then apply for a new loan, and just so you can get a better rate. But I don't know if the rates are going to substantially go down at that time, but let's hope. But if you apply, let's say in June or July, May, June or July, and the rates, you get whatever rate you were qualified for, and then by November or December, rates start plummeting, well, then maybe I would consider canceling my second disbursement of the one loan and reapplying for one that's, you know, less. You could do that.
Can you talk about, there are some private lenders out there that offer you that you can apply once and they'll give, or they say it that you'll be approved for 4 years.
Yeah, I mean, you could certainly look at that and see. I know I don't think too many of them do that. So just see, like, I think they do something to see if you are, like, how much you need for the subsequent years. There's some kind of interaction, I believe, that you would have to make to indicate how much you needed in the next year, I suppose. I don't know, like, if they're going to, I think it's worth looking into, basically, as you're weighing everything. And then just make sure that you're reading the fine print of, okay,
Right.
you know, what are the pros and the cons?
Right. And the fine print sometimes says that what they may be saying is that we can somewhat guarantee that we can lend you money up to a certain amount over these 4 years, but they may be still pulling either a soft or hard credit pull every year just to confirm that, you know, you're still creditworthy, and they're not guaranteeing a rate for 4 years. They're just kind of guaranteeing that you will have access to a certain amount of funds for 4 years. They are each year is still an individual loan, and you'll get a different interest rate for it.
Yeah, so that's good. So I think if you know, just make sure that you're understanding what that really means, whichever lenders are offering that, and you know, make sure you're reading the fine print is all I can say on that. Just like you would and should for any loan you take out, I guess, but just make sure you're up, you know, up to speed on how that works in the subsequent years.
Okay, I know we have like just a little bit of more information about some features about private loans.
Yes. Let's see here. Oh, okay. Yes, there is a lot of times there is a cosigner release available for the private loans, not the plus loans, because there is no cosigner on a plus loan typically. Although I didn't mention this, but technically if you're denied a federal plus loan, you could appeal it or apply with an endorser, which is like a cosigner. It's called an endorser. But I don't think they have an endorser release. If you were to get that far with the federal loan, if you had an endorser, I don't think they have an endorser release. But on the private loans, which is what this slide is, there some lenders do have a cosigner release. So after a certain period of time, or a certain number of payments, you can apply to get the cosigner off of there. And it does depend, the second bullet here, it does depend on the lender. You know, sometimes it's like a certain, like maybe 24 on-time payments have gone by, or maybe half of the life of the loan has gone by, that type of thing. So they are definitely out there, those programs. The interest rates will, like I said, will vary. You will probably have the option of fixed and or variable rates. So you would choose from those. That would be up to you to choose what you think is good. I know that, like, for us, we like to have we have a transparent page where once you've been approved, you can kind of see what your interest rate would be if you chose a 10-year repayment versus a 5-year repayment versus a 15-year repayment. And if you chose to pay anything during the in-school period, you know, you'll see that you would get a little discount for that and that type of thing. And then it shows you over to the right, okay, here's how much I would actually pay. And so if you can get your hands on that to make your comparisons, it'll be a lot easier for you to see like your total amount over time. And that will help you decide oh, maybe I can pay 25 bucks a month or something like that. So, but the interest rates typically for the lenders are fixed and or variable that are offered. And those interest rate discounts do exist. Especially, oh yeah, for automatic debit payments. It should have been debit payments, Debbie. I just noticed that.
Right.
We'll fix that. Yeah, sometimes there's a 0.25% interest rate reduction or a 0.5% interest rate reduction for, taking your payments out of your checking or savings account. And then other incentives, like I mentioned, you'll see interest rate reduction sometimes if you pay a little bit or pay shorter for shorter terms and that sort of thing. So take advantage of those if you can. If you can't, then, don't lock in with anything too aggressive, because you want to be able to, be comfortable and not too tight in your budget. But it's nice to save money over the life of the loan as well. So make your best judgment based on what you see once you get approved and before you make your choice. Do you assign the repayment term? Oh, you would, well, we don't assign it. You would choose. We give you options as to what you would choose. So some of our loans are, typically like 5, 8, 10, or 15 years. And then you could pick however many where you wanted to land. Other lenders will do different things, but usually they'll have different things for you to choose from. Our parent loan allows you to choose between 5 and 15 years. So you can choose 7 years if you want to, or 9 or 13 or whatever. So it's just you'll probably see a variety from any of the lenders that you would take a look at. And how many years? So usually I would say that 15 years is probably a typical maximum. Sometimes you might see, 10 or 12 or 15 or even 20, but 20, you don't usually see that unless it's more on the graduate loan side, or for like a refinance loan, like after college. So I think mostly you're probably looking at 15 years or less for the options, but it's going to vary by lender. So again, just go with what's comfortable for you. And then prepayment penalties. So here's the thing. If you choose a 15-year repayment term and then you have some sort of windfall, or after college, you're like, okay, we've still got some, I don't know, 529 savings left, or we've got some grandma gave, some money for graduation or something, and you want to pay that towards the loans. There are typically no prepayment penalties for federal or private loans. So this slide is geared towards private, but I'm just saying, like, the federal loans don't have prepayment penalties either. So, hey, if you can push some money to get rid of that loan sooner, by all means do that, and you'll pay less overall and you won't be penalized for it. So it's a good thing. And then hardships would be like if you lose a job or something like that, there are forbearance options to help you lower your payments or even pause your payments for a little while you are experiencing economic hardship during repayment. So be sure to contact the lender if you are facing that, whether it's a federal loan or a private. This is, again, a private loan slide, but I'm saying like even federal as well. And total cost of borrowing. So your monthly costs are going to be whatever the lender, it depends on what repayment plan you've chosen and how long you've chosen to do it. If you didn't choose to pay anything during school, then you won't have any payments during the in-school period. But usually there's a minimum that you have to pay. Like once you hit repayment, usually a lender will have like a minimum, like, I don't know, $50 or something like that. So they want you to at least be able to pay that, but it will depend on the lender, but you can take that into account when you're making decisions if you would like. And what will my total cost be to take out the loan and pay it back? Okay, so again, when you're approved, make sure that you're clear on, hopefully as you're shopping for a private loan lender, that you're seeing your total cost over time, which includes the interest payments, because you don't want to be surprised. And here's the other thing. Every private loan lender is required by law to provide you 3 different disclosure statements, one when you're approved, one at application, and one a final disclosure, which basically says before that money actually goes to the school, you've seen 3 different times the total amount that you would have to pay on those disclosures. And so it is transparent in the sense that they're all the same type of form. It's a federal form basically that we have to adhere to on the private lender side. And it's very clear as to what your totals will be. It's kind of like if you took out a credit card, technically they're required to give you that type of thing too, that shows like, or if you take out a loan of some sort, they're required to show you that information too, like for a mortgage or a car loan. It's similar for the private loans too. We have to show you very clearly what you're about to, to have over, the life of the loan. So that's good.
And Kat, that you also on College Ev's website, you have calculators, right? That people can use to see, like, can fool around and say, if I, change like how long I'm going to take to pay it back, then, you can see what the monthly rate's going to be and
yep.
and
So
what
if you
the total
go,
cost.
yes, thank you, Debbie. I forgot. But if you go to collegeapp.com, you can, under resources and tools, you can play around with some of the calculators. And these are good for, I mean, even if you're not a College Ave borrower or whatnot, it at least will allow you to have a calculator that will help you play around with, okay, different loan amounts and loan terms and interest rates and see what your total cost would be. And they're very simple to use. You can see it right here. It's very simple. So highly recommend trying that regardless of what kind of loan you're looking at. And this is not a good calculator for like the PLUS loan because we don't have any place for you to put fees because we don't have any fees. So the federal PLUS loan though, I think they do have a calculator. So check out studentaid.gov for that. But yeah, we don't have fees, so we don't have that included, but definitely use those to figure it out ahead of time before you even start applying for loans. Thanks, Debbie.
Okay, last slide, because this is important about timing.
Okay, so families often wonder, like, okay, if I apply now for a private loan, is that too early? Because school doesn't start until August, late August, early September. So the question is, or the answer is, it depends on the lender, because it's probably not too early, because usually the credit is valid for quite a while. And as long as the school certifies the loan, certifies it meaning they are certifying that the student is enrolled and will be there in the fall. And they certify how much the student is eligible for, which is cost minus other aid. Like, for example, we allow 180 days before as long as the school certifies the loan within 180 days of when the family applied, then the credit doesn't expire. It never expires after that. So if you think about it, as long as the school is certifying the loan by the start of classes at the worst case scenario, and most of them do it sometime in the summer for the fall. But let's say worst case scenario, and somebody doesn't certify the loans at the school side until the end of August. Even if you had applied like at the end of February, it still would have been valid. So it's good to know like how long your credit is good for when you're picking a lender, because, if they expire faster, then you wouldn't want to apply too early. But for us, like, we've had people applying since February for the fall. So, you could wait it out and see if the interest rates on private loans go down. Again, the federal rate is going to be what it is, what I showed you tonight. So that's not going to go down. But the private loans, if you wanted to wait, you could, or, you could do it now and see what you qualify for. I think a lot of times the families are most interested in peace of mind. Worst case scenario is if you apply too early and then rates start to really go down, You can always cancel that first one and reapply. It will be a second credit check unless it's, within a certain number of days. So, but if the interest rate is substantially lower 2 months from now, I guess technically you could cancel that first one and reapply, and do another one. Be a smart shopper that way, but you don't want too much hassle. So I would say that most lenders probably we're allowing a decent amount of time. If you wanted to apply this early, it's quite normal for families to be applying in May, to be honest. May and June, July are our busiest times in terms of applications, pretty much. So it is super common that, quite frankly, families start normally in April, but this year everything got delayed with the FAFSA delays. So, I don't know if I answered that great, but it does depend on the lender, because if their credit doesn't last like ours does for 180 days, then you might run into an issue. If the school doesn't certify it in the short enough time, then the credit could expire. But a lot of colleges will certify alternative loans for private loans for the fall semester, starting, I'd say, June, July, and August. That's when they certify the loans. So you're going to get reminders from lenders saying, hey, you might want to let your school know to certify it, because we still have it sort of out here. You're going to get reminders, because that's normal that a lender would tell you that it hasn't been certified. But I wouldn't panic and make a bunch of calls to the schools, because I do know, just anecdotally from the number of people I know nationally in financial aid, they really don't certify fall loans until typically June, July, and August. So they will get to it, but it doesn't always come like early. It doesn't always come like before you think it might be. So if you get reminders from the lender, I wouldn't really panic on that too much until it's getting kind of later in the summer. So if you've been approved for the loan and what you really want to be concerned about is it showing on your bill? Because if you get a bill in June or July and it doesn't reflect there, you're not going to want to pay that bill from the school, because you want the loan to be deducted from that. So that's when you should start caring about those reminders. You want the school to take that into account, make sure that your bill from the school is reflecting any other loans that you have, like a parent loan or a student loan or whatever.
Well, we've covered a
good?
lot.
Okay.
We've covered for families that are just starting the process, families that are in the need to borrow now. So there's definitely been a lot of information. A link to the recording goes out tomorrow if you want to re-watch this. I will also say that we have scheduled another session at the beginning of June, which is just going to be focused on loans. So if you want to kind of, you'll get emails about it, come back. Like I feel like this was a lot of information for a lot of people to absorb tonight, but so I would recommend you kind of, let it sink in, start doing your research, gather your questions, and then, honestly, nobody needs to make a decision between now and beginning of beginning of June, and then kind of come back for our next session, which is we'll just focus on loans, and then we can answer even more questions that you might have accumulated until then. So just want to thank everybody for coming tonight. I know, again, we covered a large swath of information. I just do want to summarize, because people have been asking, and I've answered a lot of questions, Kat, while you were talking, and chime in on my summary. But the summary for the families who have a graduating senior is, as Kat already mentioned, max out the federal student loans for your student. Always, they should always be taking those loans first, again, because they are the only loans that they can take that are only in their name. It's most likely going to be the lowest rate that they can get on their own. And there's other, federal protections around those loans. And then if you need to borrow after your student maxes out the federal student loans, then you should shop around as you would for any financial product that you're going to use. Get rates from different lenders, and then you're going to compare those rates against the Parent Plus loan and kind of probably have like a whole pro and con column set up about, which direction you're going to go, but at least you'll have done your homework. So that's kind of the quick summary of how to approach the process.
It's a lot of information, so relax, and hopefully, you can always listen to the recording if you really wanted to.
Listen to the recording. You can ask questions in the Paying for College 101 Facebook group. You can send me questions. I always reach out to Kat. So there's, different resources that we can get your questions answered, because you may not even know what your questions are yet because you haven't dug in. Which makes complete sense. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the long night. And
Thanks for
thank you,
hanging on.
Kat. Your voice kind of held out almost to the very
Almost.
end.
Yep. Well, thank you, Debbie.
Thank
Okay.
you.
We'll see everyone soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.